Rep the South Side whenever you pay with your White Sox debit card from Wintrust Community Banks and score perks like free ATMs, no monthly fees, and a $300 opening bonus. Pay with pride every time with Wintrust, Chicago's bank.
Hey everybody, it's Chuck Garfien. Welcome back. It is another edition of the White Sox podcast, brought to you as always by Wintrust, Chicago's bank. Show your team pride with a White Sox debit card. Get yours at wintrust.com/Sox. Member FDIC, EHL lender. All right, it is time to do a podcast to talk about 𝗻𝗏𝗏 𝗏𝗏 Jr., who is struggling big time. It has been a rough season for him at the plate. The White Sox have moved him down in the order to try to get him going. Will he turn it around? When will he turn it around? How does this affect his trade value? And is the trade talk affecting 𝗻𝗏𝗏 𝗏𝗏 Jr.? We talk about all that and more with Scott Merkin of MLB.com, who's back on the podcast. And we also talk about Kyle Teel, who out of nowhere is starting to take ground balls at first base in AAA. What does that mean? And how does this season compare to last season? It is Scott Merkin and me talking about all that and more on the White Sox podcast. Here we go. All right, back on the podcast, a fellow Homewood Flossmoor Viking. It is Scott Merkin from MLB.com. You've been covering the White Sox for MLB.com for how many decades?
Oh, since I was trying to think of an old manager to mention, and I can't think of one. It's just, since 23.
Chuck Tanner.
Since Chuck Tanner, there you go. Since Bob Lemon.
Since the 50s.
Since this is my 23rd season. I always go by the manager. I don't know if I can break it down real quick. Jerry Manuel 1, 𝗬𝗏𝗏 8, 5 for Robin, 4 for Ricky, 2 for Pedro and Grady, 2 for Tony and Miguel, and now 1 for Will Benham.
And there was 1 game for Don Cooper.
I think 2 games for Don Cooper.
2 games for Don Cooper.
2 games for Don Cooper.
All right, so
and there were probably
we
a few for Joey Cora in there too, right?
No, I was not here for the Jerry Manuel era at all.
I just had 1 year, 03. My first year was Jerry Manuel.
I had it in my contract, I will only cover the White Sox if 𝗬𝗏𝗏 Guillen is the manager.
Well, there you go.
So,
there you go.
There it is. We got to start with 𝗻𝗏𝗏 𝗏𝗏 Jr.
Yeah.
He is the story with this team right now because of his struggles this year. Where do you think things are at with him?
You know, I think you can look at it plus and negative, and people who are watching this are probably like, there is plus right now. But, I mean, the plus is he's been healthy, barring, some knee soreness, which I think is probably just wear and tear from the course of the year, at least what we know of right now.
Yeah.
And so he's been healthy all year, and he does lead the American League, or last check he did, in stolen bases. And he's also still played good defense in center field. So that's all part of what you get when 𝗻𝗏𝗏 𝗏𝗏 is at the top of his game. Now, the flip side is he's not hitting, and he's not hitting for any kind of power.
No.
He's not getting the ball in the air at all, and, he's kind of in between. He has a good approach up there, but as we saw in the game Sunday afternoon against the Orioles, leads off the 9th inning. I think the guy's name was Ryan Baker.
Yeah.
I want to say 3-2 pitch, and it was a fastball, one that Robert usually does some damage on, and took it for strike 3. So you wonder if, I understand the day and age now, it's all, on base percentage, OPS, and averages knocked down. You want that good approach. You don't want him to chase. And his chase is the lowest it's been in his career. His walk percentage is the highest it's been in his career. He's going to set a single season personal record for most walks. But he's also a guy who's got to be instinctive and just swing and just go out there and not think too much about, and I'm just putting this thought out, he hasn't told me this, but not think too much about, should I take this pitcher? Just go out. That's what changed him in 23. In 23, people forget the year he put together probably one of the more complete seasons in White Sox history. He was not very good in April, and he just went back to kind of just seeing the pitch, hitting the pitch, and going from there, and he was tremendous all year. So, he's just, people can doubt this, but he's too good to have these kind of numbers right now, and I just don't think they'll last. Now, the second part of it, not to go too long on this answer, is, it's got to be tough when you're talked about basically from November on that you're going to be traded, right? I mean, Garrett Crochet handled it pretty well last year. He actually handled it very well last year. But, Robert's heard about this, and he's probably heard a couple times where, not close, but there were some offers in there. And in talking about 3 or 4, about 3 times one-on-one in spring training, I think he thought he was not going to be with the team when the season started. So it's got to be tough, almost certainly knowing you're not going to be here August 1st, to keep playing through this and have that in your mind.
Yeah, and you look at the numbers. I can't believe this is where things are at. We are in June. And he ranks, as we tape this, 159th in on-base percentage, even with all the walks. And slugging and OPS, he ranks 164th. I mean, he is almost at the very bottom. And here's a guy who the White Sox were hoping would have a comeback season and they could potentially trade him. And here I am, I'm saying trading him. And I'm just wondering, it's tough to read his mind or any player's mind, but specifically his, because of the language barrier. We don't know him very well. I don't know if he has the ability to shut off the noise and play good baseball with trade rumors going on. I don't think he has it in him.
Now, I did ask him a few times about that in spring training with Billy Russo's help. And I remember spring training is very low-key.
Yeah.
So there's nothing, really that counts then, especially for a guy who's a lock times 10 on the roster. Yeah. And he basically told me that he let his, he's represented by Scott Boris's group now, and he let them handle it. And they come to him and tell him when he needs to know stuff, or, probably even more than when he needs to know stuff, and go from there. So, but I do think if just as a natural person, it's going to be on your mind, thinking that, like, there's probably no thought in his mind saying, like, oh, I wonder if I'll still be here next year. He knows he won't be here next year. There's almost no chance he'll be here next year. I could probably even take the almost out of there. And it's got to play on your mind a little bit. And I asked him the last time we talked to him if maybe, this is a guy who not only has played in the postseason, but has excelled in the postseason. Yeah. And does the losing, wane on you a little bit? And he said no, because he's part of it. He's not doing his job right now. So he had good answers the last time we talked to him. And even the last time I asked him about, is he thinking about the trade stuff still? And he said, I'm paraphrasing totally now, but he said, what teams are going to want me the way I'm playing right now?
When he said that was one of the biggest shockers from the clubhouse this year.
But you have to give him credit for being self-aware.
I'm giving him credit. I love that he said it.
Yeah.
Because, we've covered him his entire career.
Yes.
Because of the language barrier, we know him at a limited basis, just through the translation. I mean, I've talked to him a little bit in English, but I mean,
same here.
Not to the point of like I know other guys. And for him to say that really gave me a really good idea about where he is emotionally and mentally right now.
He's been very good the last 2 years, especially in one-on-ones. I've noticed, and he's a very low-key guy, just in general, language barrier or not. You see him, he just kind of gives you a nod and smiles. But I mean, for those who question this, not just my viewpoint, because obviously I see some, like you see some, but not all. But you talk to players, you talk to coaches. He is an extremely hard-working dude, and he is trying to find the answer to this. It's not like he's sitting back, leaning on the couch saying, okay, when they trade me, I'll get going. He's trying to figure it out, and it's just not clicking. I do also wonder if whatever team he ends up going to, if he becomes like maybe the third or fourth guy in the lineup, not the guy that every pitcher.
Here's what I think is going to happen. Here's what I think is going to happen. He'll get traded to a team that can bat him 7th or 8th because they're so good, and they don't need him to carry the team. And I think one of the reasons why he is struggling so much was that when he was at his best, he still had Abreu here.
Right.
He still had hitters around him, and he's putting all this pressure on himself, and he's going deeper and deeper and deeper into a hole, and that has created wherever he is right now.
Well, and no offense to anyone else in the lineup. Tauchman's hit well since he come back. He's come back. Vargas has been great for more than a month now, right? Benintendi's hit well, but I mean, he's still the guy if you're the opposing team. Even hitting whatever his average and his slugging is, that you say you can't let him beat us.
Right.
And if he goes, and I wasn't even saying in the lineup, if he goes to a team where he's like the 4th or 5th most relied upon guy, that takes some pressure off, right? And he can just go back to playing baseball and not thinking.
Yeah.
And just, going from there. Overthinking, I guess.
If you go back 3 years, believe it or not, to 2022, 2021, he was batting at times 7th.
Right.
We're here with the White Sox. I think a team that's going to want him is going to be like, hey, we don't need him. We want his defense, and if he blows up offensively and has a great second half or whatever, last 2 months, that's awesome. But he doesn't have to be alpha. And the Sox really don't have an alpha in that clubhouse offensively, and that's why I also feel like once he went out the door, and Grandal and TA and all these guys, it just kind of, and Moncada and Jimenez, I'm not saying anything against the guys who are here, picking up the slack, but he's the one carryover, him and Vaughn, and look what's happened to him and Vaughn this year.
Yeah. I just think that people kind of, in this day of great analytics and StatCast and everything else, kind of play down the
human side.
The human side. And I think it's a change of scenery thing. I really do think that, and I'm not saying he doesn't like it here. I think he's enjoyed his time. He's talked over and over again. And you heard 𝗂𝗍𝗶𝗹 say this about, this was a team that gave me a chance to achieve my dream, right?
Yep.
I lived my dream because of the White Sox. But I think, it may be time for both sides to part. Well, it's going to be time soon.
Yeah.
And I think it probably won't hurt the White Sox, and it will definitely help Luis Robert.
I was talking to a former player on the White Sox.
Former player on the White Sox.
In the offseason, and he said the best thing for Vaughn and Robert would be for them to be traded or go somewhere else just because it's time.
Well, I agree. And, Andrew Vaughn, we both know Andrew Vaughn. Andrew Vaughn's a great guy.
Yeah.
Another hard worker. Him and his wife have done a lot of charitable stuff. Now, fans will look at that and be like, okay, that's great. It's great he's charitable. We want him to hit, 25 home runs. But I think I want
Vaughn here for his charity. He does not need to hit.
He, for some reason now, has become the object of vitriol with the team's shortcomings, and I think it's because he's struggled, first of all.
Yeah.
Although up until this point he hasn't had overwhelming numbers, but he's had good numbers.
Right.
This year he is not. So yeah, I see what you're saying on that it could be a time for a change for him too. And I think also with him it plays into the fact that he was the number 3 pick in a draft, right? In a draft that gave Bobby Witt Jr. and Adley Rutschman on top of it, right?
Him.
Yeah. So I think that whether you like it or not, it kind of factors into it too in terms of expectations that, okay, he's had 17, 18 homers a year and 80 RBIs and hit like 250, but that's not the number 3 pick in the draft. That's what people will say.
You want more. Okay,
right.
So, Robert, where is his trade value right now? Obviously, I'll just answer it. Not good.
Right.
It is very low. And do you think he can fix himself before the deadline? I shouldn't say no. Do you think he can? I'm sure you think he can. Will he?
Yeah, I mean, will he? If I could say he definitely will, Chris might, put me on staff. Now he still probably won't put me on staff.
That'd be the biggest mistake in the history of the White Sox
way
franchise.
Too much about Michigan stuff to him if I was on staff. I used to joke with him that he asked to get traded to Kansas City, so I would stop talking to him about Michigan stuff.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, I think he's got the ability. I'll still hold to this that whatever the injuries have done over the years, and he's dealt with quite a few, he's just too good to be at this level right now. He is just too outstanding of a talent, too hard of a worker. Now, it's easy to say, it's got to still produce. But the bottom line is there's no rush for Chris, right? I mean, if it takes 3 weeks, it may be he may go on a run for 15 days, and they may get an offer at that point. That makes it.
Well, that's the way a baseball season can go, and we've seen it many times where it's like when you're in it, you're like, this is never going to get fixed, and then all of a sudden someone gets hot for 2 weeks, and the narrative changes and the player changes. That's what they're hoping for.
Miguel Vargas is a great story, right?
Yeah, that's a great example.
He had a horrible run with the Sox last year, and it was tough, You're going from eventual World Series champion to the worst team, one of the worst teams in the history of baseball. It's a new environment. You don't know a lot of people.
Yeah.
Then he comes in this year and has good at-bats, but doesn't have the results. Suddenly it clicks, and he's been one of the most dynamic offensive players in the American League during those 5 weeks. So if you get that kind of turn from Robert, you're going to get some interest, because I think there already still is interest just on the basis of this guy is good. This guy's got a ton of talent. If nothing else, he's going to, like you said, you can put him lower in the order. He's going to play great defense. He's going to steal some bases. And if he gets hit, my goodness, remember he's got 2 options at $20 million each with, I think it's a $2 million buyout. That's a pretty good deal for a guy of Luis Robert's talent if he's hitting.
If he's hitting.
With this year and then $40 million over 2. Well, yeah, that can be, if is the key for anyone who's making that kind of money.
Yeah,
right?
So fans are wondering, hey, can the White Sox send him down to the minors? Can they have him go to Arizona like Colson Montgomery and work on his swing? What can happen? What can the White Sox do other than putting him on the bench or doing what they're doing now, which is batting him 7th?
Colson's a different story, obviously, because he's a minor leaguer.
Yeah.
So they can switch him and do what they want. And same with what they're doing with Hagen Smith, what they're doing with Jairo Ariarte.
Yeah.
That's their control. With Luis, he has too much service time. Like I'll use the example we were just talking off the air about Jose Contreras. I can't remember the year that he came back from tearing. He tore his Achilles. I can see it. We're sitting right here.
07 or 09.
He was covering first base,
yeah.
and he tore his Achilles. He came back, and he was bad. He just couldn't get anyone out. He was getting crushed. And he talked to them about going to Charlotte for like maybe a month, 4 or 5 starts, worked it out, and came back and was solid again. So I think it would be that kind of thing. I do not expect Luis Robert to go anywhere but here and just work through here. I don't think it helps any to send him to Charlotte. I mean, this is not a team. It's not like, and again, not to cast aspersions at guys who are working hard, trying to win. but it's not a team that, like, if 𝗬𝗏𝗏 hit, you could see them in the wild card picture or something like that. So they're going to let him go. I don't think it helps the trade value at all to say, oh, but look, he's 5 for 5 at Charlotte last night. Doesn't make a difference. So he's going to be here to work this out, and I think he will. I'm not sure he's going to work it out to 36 homers, 38 doubles level, but I think he's going to work it out to where his interest is going to peak at some point.
Let's hope that happens.
Yes.
It's been tough watching. It's got to be extremely tough for him.
Way tougher for him than us, probably.
Yes.
Not probably, for sure.
But I would take his salary.
Yes, I would too. Well, you're pretty close, right?
By many millions. Many millions.
I think if you combine our salaries, we're still not there.
And my house, I believe, is 20,000 square feet less than his house. Changing the subject.
Yes.
We're going inside the White Sox. This is brought to you by Toyota. Let's go places, and let's go to AAA and talk about Kyle Teel. Because sudden development, and you want to tell people what he's been doing in AAA.
Yeah, I asked him today at the end of the Zoom about, it's the way of baseball now. You got to be versatile. I think I go back to, like, Chris Bryant and, like, the 16 Cubs, who played third, he played center, he played right, he played first, he DH'd. Well, he didn't DH, but he played all over. But he told us that he had worked the last couple days before the game at taking grounders at first base. Now, 𝗬𝗏𝗹 kind of played that down and said it's just kind of him being athletic, but I don't think Will is going to probably come out and say, oh, yeah, he's going to start working there at first base until, like, we actually see him do it. I mean, I do know this for a fact, and Sergio Santos, who's doing a great job as managers. They have really good development people throughout the whole system. I was in Charlotte for 3 days, Kannapolis for a day, and I talked to Sergio. I talked to Kyle then, too, and Sergio said, unprompted, Kyle will benefit from catching a full season here. So I don't know if it'll be a full season, but I just don't see him coming anytime soon, because then you split with, you have Corey Lee, who's not exactly on AARP. He's not an old guy. And then you have Quero already up here.
Right.
And by having them in separate locations, they can catch more frequently, and that's a big thing for Kyle. Learning the kind of ins and outs. I talked to some of the pitchers there, and how about they said about how good he is now at asking questions, talking to them during, like, shagging, talking to them in the clubhouse about what they want, what they need in a game, calling wise and all that. So he's developed and all that. Now, I mean, he's hitting the heck out of the ball, and that would, if you did bring him up and he had some experience at first, then you would be able to at least keep him in the lineup. He wasn't catching all the time, but I think they want him to catch and just, learn more about that craft, learn as much as he can about that craft, because they do view him as a catcher, and he views himself, as he made clear today, as a catcher first.
Well, here's a question then for you, because if they want to get Quero time behind home plate,
right,
and they want Teel as well, and they're basically, I mean, we're like splitting hairs with these two guys. I'm not saying they're the same, but they're both, the part of the future. What would be wrong with having maybe Edgar Quero go down for some time and let Kyle Teel try some games up here?
You could do that. I think they just, right now they like the formation they have, the consistency they have. And Edgar's, hit a little bit of a bump offensively recently, but that's going to happen, right? I was just talking to Justin 𝗪𝗓 about Caglione coming up, because it was his dad who's the manager of Omaha, who gave him the message that he's going up. And, we said he's going to come up and he's going to hit some homers.
Maybe this weekend, hopefully not.
But, to the back of the bleachers somewhere. But he's going to have a stretch where he probably goes over 10 and strikes out 10 times too, right? Yeah. It's part of, even at the highest level of prospects, you go through that stretch where the league figures you out a little bit. They get a little more information on you, and then you have to adjust and kind of figure them out too.
Right.
But, that's a possibility too. But, it does sound like they like what he's doing there, let him learn there, and then, be ready to go maybe at the end of this year, but for sure in 26.
Okay. If he is taking some ground balls at first base, that leads me to believe what's up next, he will play some first base. I think he's going to be here at some point. He's hitting. The bat is saying he's ready for this. And I
agree with you.
Yeah, but also there's a lot of various opinions. I'm sure Sergio Santos is thinking he would benefit by catching. But I think Chuck Garfien, sportscaster, thinks it would benefit Kyle Teel to come up here to the major leagues.
I agree with you. I agree. But I do remember, and you remember this, 𝗭ose 𝗵𝗹 used to take grounders at third and short. Just athletic.
Okay,
and we didn't see him play third
are we making that comparison right now?
I just did. But I
the wrong comparison.
I do think Kyle will eventually get some games there. I really do. I think, he'll probably play a couple at first base, just like we saw Colson playing some third base during the Arizona Fall League, right?
Yep.
And they talked about, the priority guys were already locked in at short, so he had to play third. But I think they wanted to see him at third too, and that that's a possibility for him in the future as well.
All right, so we are in June, and last year was last year, and we still have the scars. We'll always have the scars from that season. Are you feeling like this is a better team, much better team, the same? Where do you stand with where things are at in this rebuild after what we've been watching this year?
I'll share a story for you in broad strokes. And there was a reporter.
You tell stories?
A reporter, I do. I
Okay.
think I do it pretty well.
Okay.
Reporter in our company who covered for me on a road series last year and a road series this year.
All right.
And when I was off for that series, and last year after the road series, he called me and he said, "I feel terrible for you. This is one of the worst teams I've ever seen."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Well,
They are.
they're bad, but I get paid. We get paid either way.
Yeah, you have to cover them anyway.
But it's nice of you, and there are good stories to find, no matter what the record is.
That is
we
true.
found that last year. This year, he covered for me on another series I didn't go to on the road, and he texted me and said, "This team is so much better this year."
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "I don't think he said," and he's covered baseball a long time, and he said, a few bats here and there to add in because obviously the offense has struggled, and they could get a little closer. I mean, there's still. I think Chris would tell you. I think Josh Barfield, Jin Wong, Gene Watson, who just walked by us, anyone would tell you there's a lot of work to be done. It's not like next year is going to be, at least at the start, is going to be competitive. Maybe at the end of after the All-Star break next year, but they have played better baseball. I mean, the good news, I wrote this yesterday, the good news is they've been in so many 1- and 2-run games. The bad news is they lose a lot of those 1- and 2-run games.
So I got the number here. They're 58% of their losses have been by 2 runs or less.
That's crazy.
They're 3-15 in one-run games.
Yeah. And even worse,
As we tape
I
this.
think 0-11 on the road in 1-run games.
That is true.
So here's the thing: they're 12-15
with 6 walk-offs.
Right. Tough.
Tough
Like the
ones.
old Cleveland days. So they're 12-15 at home as we tape this.
Yeah.
So I think you're starting to see a team that's starting to get comfortable at your home, and that's like one of the first things you see from good teams. They still kind of haven't gotten to that point where they can win the close ones or win on the road. They're 6-26, I want to say, on the road right now.
Yeah.
So that's the next step. But they don't have the full complement of who they envision on the next big team here yet. So we'll see how that plays out as it develops.
Yeah, the way I look at it is that they have been in so many games, and if they had just a little bit more offense, they have maybe they're 28th in runs. If they were 22nd, 22nd in runs, this is a whole different season. And the payroll is extremely low.
Right.
And if I was to be the owner of this team and spend some money.
Is that happening soon?
I'm in conversations with Jerry to buy the team.
Oh, boy.
I've got about $500. Could I buy this franchise, Scott, for $500?
I'll chip in $250.
Hey,
so there
for
we go.
$750. We're going to own the White Sox.
We're almost there.
I would,
we almost
listen,
get a suite.
I mean, the payroll is $78 million.
Right.
$78 million. This can be fixed a lot quicker than you think. They just got to figure out who's on board, who's not, who's a part of the future, who's not, and then let's spend some money and win some games.
And when do they want to spend? Is it? I don't think it's going to be this offseason, but is it the offseason?
It could start.
Yeah, it could.
Why not start?
There's certainly going to be room to do it, right? But that's not our purveyance on that one.
Well, after I buy the team, I promise
that will be a different thing.
That we'll have some bats.
All right.
All right. Hey, thanks for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure. I was here. It's been a minute since I've been here. I was starting to feel a little left out.
On the podcast?
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I was told not to have you on for at least 7 months, and as soon
you
as
alphabetically finally got down to the M's. Is that that's what it was?
Yeah, and it was literally 7 months and a day. I'm like, I'm getting Merkin on.
I appreciate you keeping track. Go Vikings as always.
Go Vikings. And where'd you go to elementary school?
I was in Chicago.
In Chicago.
We moved when I was in 6th grade. Boy, people are going to love here. They want to hear the whole background?
No, we don't.
I was bar mitzvahed in Homewood, if you want to know that. Went to University. I don't know if people know, but I went to University of Michigan. And that's about all
this
I got.
podcast is over. We cannot talk about Michigan with Scott Merkin.
Thanks for having me, Chuck.
All right. Scott Merkin here on the White Sox podcast. Hawk Harrelson, take it away.
All right, Chuck, this edition of the White Sox podcast is over.